Where Loyalties Lie. Honor Guard. Chapter 8. Prestidigitation by Loyalliar. In the early hours of the night, the humble vineyard was not home to many patrons. A waiter approached the one and only guest who had still yet to order. He didn't have to prompt her to state what she wanted. "A plate of spaghetti," the mayor ordered.
Will there to be a spaghetti tortellini or the spaghetti spinazzi tonight?"
She rolled her eyes at the question. "The normal one, whatever that is."
"Of course. It's a drink."
"Do you have any of that single malt stuff?" The waiter nodded stiffly.
"Does the man prefer Shetland or the Clydesdale?"
"Stronger the better," she responded with a cocky smile. "That'll be it."
"Of course, ma'am. I'll be in the back in a moment to take the sir's order."
"Sir, what are you talking about?" Goodmood was highly evaporated at a glance at a pony glancing over her table. Without her asking permission, the towering stallion sat opposite of her and offered her a stern gaze.
"Good morning, going solo."
"Shining armor." The drug dealer wrinkled her nose. "Do you even have any non-criminal contacts?"
"Easy misses are for recruits who I don't want in danger."
"There's no need to flatter me," Solo responded as sarcastically as possible. "I take it you figured out what you wanted after the last time we spoke. Where's the cute little fitting?"
"That's none of your business, Solo. If your info did help us out, though, even if it almost got me killed."
"Well, yeah. At least one of us held up their end of the bargain then."
The mayor adjusted her vest and glared.
"Where'd you throw the thing, anyway?"
"What thing?"
"My wagon! You told me I could go get it and head out, but when I showed up at your stupid headquarters the next morning, they said it'd been commandeered for a covert operation!"
Shining shrugged and then shook his head. "I don't remember approving anything like that. I'll take a look when things settle down. Right now, though, I need your help."
"Fat chance of that, Shannon. I don't work on credit."
Shining Armor leaned forward and placed both his forelegs on the table. It was a gentle motion, but it drew out the incredible difference in the pony's sizes.
"Then you could consider not being arrested as payment." "What? You gonna accuse me of treason again? I don't think that's really gonna stick. It's not gonna scare me, that's for sure."
Shining narrowed his eyes. "I'm not asking a lot."
"I think you're not asking at all, Shannon Armor. What do you actually need from me?"
He glanced left and right, making sure no pony was listening. Only when satisfied did he build up the courage to speak. "I'm looking for a pony named Grizz. I think you mentioned him." Going Solo's face broke into a wicked grin, before she fell back on her haunches.
"Grizz? Grizz Solo? As in, the Grizzly?"
She struggled to speak between peals of laughter.
"You want me to set you up with him?"
"Do I sound like I'm kidding?" The captain responded in an entirely serious tone. It took her a moment to choke down the humor he didn't share.
"Well, the way I see it, there's two reasons you could come to me for this. Maybe you're kidding. If not, it means you sure as hey don't understand the first thing about Grizzaloo."
Solo looked up from the guard's pony across the table as the waiter placed down the plate of spaghetti, accompanied by an entire single malt of Clydesdale whiskey. He glanced Shining Armor's way, only to be waved away by a hoof. He then left the two ponies in peace with no more than a curt nod. Shining returned his focus to the mare, who had begun to greedily consume her dinner. "I know he's a crime boss, and that some of my guard use him as a source when things are bad. What else is there?" She gulped down a tortuous mouthful before continuing.
"Well, you're pretty far off the mark if you think he's a boss. Grizzaloo works alone, and he's more like a vigilante than a crime boss."
"A vigilante?"
"Well, not the way you usually think. He gets his cash running basically a protection racket of good, honest merchants like me."
The sarcasm wasn't lost on the captain, who nodded sternly.
"Most every pony who works in the shadows answers to him. Sort of. He looks down on us. Sometimes he'll force his own crazy rules on us."
"Like what?"
"He'll break your knees if you try to sell the kids. Don't mug any pony hard enough to live in downtown. That sort of thing. It sounds nice when you aren't on the receiving end."
Okay, what does this have to do with you?
Grizzly hates me, shining armor. He might as well just hate every pony altogether. I don't know. But I can't just walk up to him and say I want to talk. Or rather, I could, but I like being able to fly on my own.
I'll take care of walking up to Solo. I just need directions. Going Solo stopped and looked around the room nervously. To her satisfaction, the restaurant was almost completely abandoned that night. Her answer still came in a whisper.
He won't see you. Look, we could go together if you need it that bad, but you gotta make it worth my time.
If it's that much of an issue, I'll go in armor and just get the information I need the simple way.
Don't be an idiot, shining armor. You think you'd still be out free if you were dumb enough to get caught by a raid? No, it's gonna have to be my way. Meet me on the gravel street in a few hours. And do something with your coat. You're a little too famous these days to be walking around unnoticed.
Shiny nodded and got up. Thanks. Going Solo answered by stretching her wings and rising to her own hoofs.
Don't thank me just yet, Captain. Clydesdale Scotch is expensive.
Before Shiny could process the statement, she shot out an open window nearby, leaving Shiny to deal with the approaching layer and a little black tab his horn carried through the air. In the glow of a small but vibrant campfire, a young mare sat beside an old broken stallion. With his every breath, she endured the curious sensation of his coat brushing against hers. She had yet to decide if the feeling was comforting. She could recall feeling the same contact from her grandfather on long nights as a young filly when her wings were just getting used to really flying. She loved it more than anything else when he carried her high in the sky, further than her still growing wings could carry her, and then held her in his furrows and let her look down on the whole wide world without fear of falling. Unlike her grandfather, Rainbow could not bring herself to be truly comfortable with dead reckoning. She seen beneath the thin veneer of his jokes and cocky way he carried himself through the thick jungle. She seen in the corner of his eye both the cold analysis of a killer and the stark shine of madness. It was in spite of these faults that she offered him her presence and her comfort, because she could still tell that he needed them. Some part of her offering came out of pity. Some part came from out of guilt at the way she had yelled at him, despite his own error. No small part came from her desire to remain away from the tree line, where her imagination assured her that some dragon, or manticore, or other beast waited to leap out and devour her at the first opportunity. Most of her decision to remain at Reckoning's side, though, found its origin at a word that had already begun to lose its meaning for her. A word that in her mind could not possibly be separated by her own destiny, or a vibrant golden necklace buried away in an impregnable vault at Canterlot. Blindly, loyalty had torn her away from her friends and thrust her into the dense dark jungles of Zebrica, even as it forced her into the one organization that she had learned to truly hate as a child. It had taken her a long time to realize just how she felt. The night in the jungle had provided such time without resistance. As their campfire slowly became the sole light, save the pale crescent glowing overhead, Rainbow heard nothing but the chirping crickets and the soft rustling of the wind in the leaves. There was nothing to see. Only the sensations she experienced were the same wind tickling her mane and the slow breathing of the stallion beside her. Her first thoughts had been simple, focused on her present situation. Could she trust Dead Reckoning? Could she forgive him? The latter was answered with a simple yes, in the timid voice of Fluttershy. The former, though, was a harder issue. Asking the stallion himself would probably give the best answer. After those were finished, she imagined herself in Ponyville. No doubt Twilight had found some new book to bury herself in. With the end of summer in sight and apple bug season around the corner, Applejack would be making a stupid bet with her older brother, and then calling in her friends to help win it. Daz could almost see Big Mac's face as the enormous pony stuttered when confronted with his sister's friends asking him to do something embarrassing, or just say 10 words in a row. Pinkie Pie had probably already come up with a bunch of great pranks. Rainbow entertained how great it would be to freeze Ponyville Lake with her new magic while some pony wasn't looking. The look would be priceless. Rarity was probably up to some insane order again. Maybe she decided to make dresses for the Grand Gallery Gala. The plan had been for the 6 friends to return after their misadventures 4 years earlier, but Rainbow wasn't sure that was likely anymore. Would there even be a gala this year, after everything that had happened? Finally Fluttershy could almost be guaranteed to be up to her usual animal care. Her life, out of all of Rainbow's friends, seemed the most stable and calm. Where that was saying much wasn't exactly clear. Then there was her number one fan. The Squirt probably still hadn't figured out how to get off the ground yet, so that wouldn't stop her from doing more damage than Rainbow ever did, crashing into buildings all across town. Then came reflections on just what she was doing in this Briken jungle, or in the Honor Guard at all. She broken her one promise to her grandfather. Papa would forgive her in an instant, even though they hadn't spoken in a few years. She wondered why she hadn't stopped by. The last time had been at Young Flyers competition 4 years earlier, and even that had been no more than 2 minutes. The minor regrets and flights of fantasy were stolen away when the massive pony beneath her wings stirred. A slow groan escaped his mouth. The stretching of his legs was followed by a series of painful pops and snaps. His eyes squinted, taking in the dark of the surrounding jungle. His wings spread only for a moment before contacting hers. Then his head jumped to the side. He seemed angered, or at least worried, for a moment. Then a genuine smile broke across his face.
You let me sleep too long.
Rainbow looked up at the moon for the 20th time that night. It had already passed most of the way into the westernmost quarter of the sky, nearly ready to set for tonight. I guess you needed it. I'm fine.
First rule of being a guards pony, Rainbow Dash. You take care of yourself, or somebody else gets hurt. Today, somebody else is me, so get some rest.
Rainbow shook her head. I want to talk first. Frankening was quiet for that. His shoulders sagged, spreading heavy wrinkles across his dirt-stained shirt, and his tired and brutalized face. The garment seemed to wear a scowl where he could not, or would not.
Guess I owe you for that. What can I tell you?
Well, to start with, what do I do if you, It occurred to Rainbow that fly out the handle wasn't the most gentle way to address him. If you have another flashback.
Just weigh it out and keep an eye on me. He shrugged. Honestly, I can usually take care of myself. But it doesn't hurt to have some pony there. What else?
Am I safe? The question came out too fast. Spat out like alfalfa from the tongue of a young foal, desperate to be rid of the taste.
What?
The question, thrown out as it was, made him drew back at something bordering on offense. Well, you kind of said you attacked the princess. Do I need to worry about you coming after me if something happens? He wouldn't even meet Rainbow's eyes when he answered her question.
I've only attacked another pony twice, Dash, and both times it was because he tried to keep me from going wherever it was that my mind said was the enemy. With the princess, it was during a meeting with the Griffin ambassador. I would have killed him if he hadn't stopped me. She did stop me.
Oh. The simple utterance was all Rainbow's mind could think of for an answer.
Soldier on wouldn't have sent you out here if I couldn't protect you anyway.
In retrospect, Rainbow would realize that he meant the words simply to placate her. At the very moment, though, her interpretation wrinkled her muzzle. What's that supposed to mean? I was doing just fine against those manticores on my own!
Calm down, Dash. I'm not trying to say anything about you.
She barely acknowledged the words. I'm out here to save Princess Luna, not to have you babysit me! His pause before reckoning answered her was disheartening. Again, his eyes stayed away from hers.
Dash, that's not
what they meant! Ugh. Rainbow rolled her eyes as her anger progressed. I know. I heard Crack and Marathon talking about it before I left. They shipped me off here because they think if I try to actually help, I'll get myself hurt and killed. It's like they don't even care about Princess Luna!
Why are you so worried about her, Dash?
The question was honest. That fact was what most set Rainbow's face into a state of astonishment and wonder. Because they were too quickly set up by the fire of her previous anger. Because she's the princess? Because she's dying? Why does it even matter? I'm going to help her!
Do you have a crush on her?
Rainbow was struck speechless, earning a potent chuckle from the older stallion. No, I don't! She protested. He offered her quirky one-eyed glance, as if accusing of her of falsehood. A blush covered her face, not embarrassment at the insinuation. Really, it's not like I spent a ton of time with her or anything. Anyway. Reckoning held up a hoof to calm the increasingly excited mare. He waited until her panting breath slowed to speak up.
I was just teasing. What I mean is, why did you get involved? Why join the Honor Guard? Do you even know her?
Rainbow's mind caught up to her tongue. He was right in a way. All her momentum spilled out in a moment of doubt. No, I guess not. I really just talked to her once, a couple days ago.
Is he convinced you to give up your whole life to become a card pony then?
The fervor and fury were back in an instant. Of course not! I'm not giving up my whole life or anything. As soon as this whole mess is over, I'm quitting.
Reckoning's eyes widened. Just the same, Rainbow. You'd make a great guards pony with a little practice.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to give up my whole life for it. So sorry. Anyway, that's what I promised Celestia. I'd help save Luna, and that's it. And I only did that because no pony else was going to.
No pony else? There's the whole honor guard for this sort of thing. Even we are running short on members these days.
Rainbow shook her head. That's what I keep getting told, but it sure doesn't seem like most of you even care about her. A dozen little clothes slowly flitted together in her mind. I hadn't actually thought about it. I guess I just kind of dove in first. But now that I think about it, it's like I'm the only one who actually wants to help her for the sake of helping her. She seems so lonely. A sudden shift overtook the scout's features. His eyes eyed narrow, and his mouth turned grim, not out of anger, but of guilt. Rainbow hadn't had the slightest hint as to the feeling's source, and his next words only made the emotion more cryptic.
You're right in a way. She's lucky to have you looking out for her.
Well, it's only till we figure out this whole mess. Then I'm done.
Fair enough.
There was clearly nothing more the older pony had to say on the subject. Reckoning walked away from the fire, approaching the nearby pond.
Want me to wash your shirt while you get some sleep?
She was quiet for a moment, as her misplaced anger settled to little more than the half-lit flames of their campfire. Afterward, it took a few seconds and a poignant stare from Deadeye to realize he had been asked a question. Huh? Oh, sure. Rainbow struggled out the dirty shirt, one button out of a time. As her hooves and wings fumbled with the fabric, she raised another question. Reckoning? Why did you join the guard? He didn't turn around to answer. Instead, Rainbow's ear only heard the echoes of his voice as it bounced across the pond and back, distant and reflective.
I signed up to see the world.
Rainbow cocked her head. That's it?
Do I need a better reason? Sure, it's not deep or surprising, but it's the truth.
He gave off a little chuckle, then went back to cleaning his shirt.
Eat 2 of those seeds in my bag, before you forget.
Oh, yeah. Rainbow made her way over to the pile of supplies beside the fire, and dug around until she found a rough brown canvas pouch. After loosening the drawstrings, she found 8 dozen almost nut-like spherical seeds spilling out. What are these?
Fake seeds. Think of them as like weights for your magic. You'll feel lousy in the morning, but they make you stronger.
Hold on! Rainbow protested. I'm not taking any crazy magic steroids. I'd never get on the Wonder Bolts. Reckoning groaned.
They're not steroids, Dash. You'll still be working to get stronger. They'll make you work on less magic, which is harder, but when you're done, you'll be a better flyer and better at magic. Just trust me on this, okay?
Fine. Rainbow popped 2 of the little orbs into her mouth and bit down. They were surprisingly juicy, though their taste was reminiscent of overripe kiwis. She quickly decided that she wasn't a fan, and swallowed both seeds with an exaggerated gulp. The taste lingered on her tongue, thick and lurid. She darted quickly to the side of the pond, ducking her muzzle into the water to clean away the taste. Once it was done, her first thought of her surroundings was Reckoning chuckled beside her.
Yeah, I'm not much for the taste either. But if you need something to eat, there's not much better for you. That is, if you can spare your magic.
Rainbow pulled her head away from the pond and looked up at dead Reckoning. Without his shirt, his chest was exposed, and what it contained left Rainbow speechless. A spiral waves of raised black and red burn scars all over spun through the front of his body, nearly reaching his shoulders on both sides. Briefly, her mind raced back to the memory of a bolt of lightning and a crack of thunder flying from her rear legs. Did I do that? Reckoning looked down at his chest, and his laughter died away.
No, Dash. This wound is a few years old now.
His wings went back to the water.
I'd rather not talk about it right now, if that's all right. Can I ask you something?
Sure, I guess, Rainbow shrugged.
Why don't you like the card?
The question set off a dozen little alarms in her head. Her stance curled up slightly, and her response came off defensive, reactioning. When did I say that? You don't need to. He gestured with his muzzle toward the way her feathers were peeking up on end at the bases of her wings. You said something about giving up your whole life. Having made his point, he looked at her eye to eye, trying to point his honest, senseless face. It didn't do much for Rainbow. No pony ever said you had to. If you don't want to talk about it, fine. She stared down into the pond and saw her own eyes staring back. It's not a big deal, I guess. Her words were no more convincing to her own ears than they must have been to Reckoning's. When I was really little, like 2 or 3, my dad joined the fight in the Dragon Wars. He said he'd be okay, promised me even. But he never came back. She expected to hear I'm sorry or some explanation of why her father had done what he did for her sake. That was what she had always got when she mentioned what little story there was to share. Instead, from Dead Reckoning, she only received long silence. She spent it staring into her own eyes, daring her long since dried tear ducts from shedding even a single drop of water. The reflection was spoken some moments later, when she suddenly was slapped in the face with a very wet safari shirt. Hey! She lashed out with a hoof, but the stallion had already jumped back, or something. She shook her head, tossing the garment onto her back, clearing her vision in a single motion. Reckoning had made his way back to the fire, chuckling to himself as he walked. What was that for?
To get you to snap out of it. You don't want to hear a guard's pony tell you he's sorry, and I didn't want to say it. I didn't make your dad leave, and nothing either of us can do will change it now.
He twisted the garment around and tossed it over her back. The water dripped onto her wings, sending welcome shivers down her wet, damp, and overheated back as he continued.
Anyway, your shirt's clean, so put it on a stick to dry by the fire and get some sleep. We can talk about something we both like better in the morning.
He returned to the fireside and began constructing a simple line to dry his own garment. Right. Rainbow answered with an utter falsity in her voice. Then she spun her own shirt into a tight ring of fabric. Dripping wet, it wasn't particularly unlike a towel, and staring away, the scout wasn't particularly like an inattentive colt in the flight camp locker room. She treasured the noise Reckoning had made for quite a while as she lay down to sleep. Dawn rose over the mountain, eliminating the truth from the fuzzy nightmares of foals and the dark sketches of shadows. Canterlot shone in a mournful way as the average pony began to get the feeling on the wind that the world might be changing very soon. It was an uncomfortable feeling for any and all with the wisdom to sense it. Tickling necks and aching trick knees were like a terrible warning. A single pony's fur stood up for another reason, as he paced under the early morning light. Shining armor didn't feel uncomfortable in his disguise. Even surrounded by enemies, he would have rather just had a basic suit of gold armor than to be stuck pretending to be somebody else. Off-green powder clung to his armpits and made his oren itch. His mane was tied back and colored some awful red color that he was trying not to think about. Undercover wasn't really his thing. Stealth skills were hard to develop when you held a reputation as the strongest mage in the entire guard. Problems were just so much easier to solve with diplomacy, reputation, and the occasional show of brute force. He idly adjusted his traveling cloak, a comfortable brown thing he had borrowed from Cade's closet, with neutral enough design to not embarrass a stallion. His focus remained on searching the aptly named Gravel Lane for his contact. Gravel Lane was the center of Low Canterlot, or downtown as the upper crust referred to it. Located on the lower side of the Mountain of Dawn than the more modern districts of the city, it had once been a mining town, taking advantage of the deep gem deposits under the mountain. Both the industry and the thriving town had effectively died when Celestia realized the mining would undermine the royal palace and send Upper Canterlot tumbling down the steep mountain cliffs. Everybody knew that downtown was the capital of Equestria's crime. It was a dark, dirty place, with plenty of dark alleyways to hide in, and shadowy corners in which to enjoy a mugging. In this particular case, every pony was dead wrong, but Shiny wasn't about to take the effort to correct them. Instead of criminals, Low Canterlot citizens were simply the desperate poor struggling to eke out a living of the wealthy, who lived quite literally above them. It was beyond the captain's comprehension why any pony would remain, while the economy of all Equestria thrived with opportunity for all. But again, it was not his place to change their decisions. His philosophical thoughts were torn away by the sudden sensation that some pony was attempting to sneak up on him. He felt like startling her after her rude departure the previous night. You aren't very subtle on hoof. He heard the sound of the mare jumping a half inch in surprise. Knowing he scored a hit, he turned toward the dealer with a cold focus. Where's this Grizzaloo? Well, keep it down, huh, Cap? She saw a nervous glance around, only to be satisfied that no pony was watching. You just don't go throwing his name around, all right? Fine. Now where are we headed? Right over there. Solo pointed to a rather nondescript tavern and began to walk toward it. Try not to make me look stupid, okay, Cap? He rolled his eyes and gritted his teeth. Of course. The door swung open to reveal the sort of seedy bar that authors wrote bad guards pony stories about. That is to say, it was the sort of place that no self-respecting criminal would actually visit, since the guard would be on them in a second. Instead, the patrons were the sort of low-city ponies who just couldn't afford to go anywhere better. No pony seemed motivated to look up at them, and they weren't sure that it wouldn't cost them anything. Even in disguise, Shiny still felt like he didn't belong. Amidst the low lights of hanging lamps, at least half an inch which were broke out or burnt, stone flooring, supported wagon wheels for tables, and cheap wooden chairs that had barely begun to work enough to remove the bark. The bartender was a heaviest unicorn mare, with a mane that hung down one side of her head in a series of braids. She was idly polishing a glass, though her actual attention was spent sweeping the room. She only stopped when the disguised guard captain and his guide pulled out a pair of stools and slouched down in front of her. Going Solo spoke up before the other mare had an offer agreed. We Nips, I'd like you to meet my friend Cap. You're here, ain't ya? Her accent resembled Tryham. If the pony simply didn't care about the accent being understood. Oi. The whole phrase blurred together as if only a single word had been spoken. What you drinking? Shiny rarely drank, and when he did, it tended to be the fine battalion wines that Keynes' father continued to supply. He put into a wine cellar into their new home. It still had a backlog of Servando's obnoxious gifts. At a tavern, he had no idea what even to say. He caught his normal tone as he continued. A beer! He forced his usual speaking tone down an octave, and added just a bit of grittiness for his adventure. There's a beer. Oi, look at you. You can drink a half a house. I've known enough of your kind to know when you need something stronger. No, just a beer, he insisted. Fine. It's two us. She saw Shiny's brow raised. He offered her a chance at going solo. Lee Nips sighed and rolled her eyes. 2 bits called, and open your ears. Now, get to telling me what bringing a huge bloke like yourself into my pub. I am glad for this fanfic. So far it has given me a chance to do Russian accents, has so far given me a chance to bring out my Cockney accents, and now it's giving me a chance to do a female Cockney accent. God, I love voicing this fic. After processing the words, Shiny glanced over to a bowl sitting in the bar. It contained a few bits, but not enough to cover the wood on the bottom. He dropped 2 of his own in, and offered a smile. I'm looking for some pony. Oi, we actually know where he is, Neeps. I'll be taking him back now. Sorry, completely wrong character. We actually know where he is, Neeps. We'll be taking him back now. The bartender stared at his 2 bits in the bowl and looked back at him. Those right, seen as I'm telling ye. Ye from motel then? With ye, we stubby lads running about the place. What kind of pony was ye topsides looking for down here? Though he kept a relatively calm face, Shiny's mind was racing. He hadn't expected some pony to guess that he was from the wealthier parts of Canterlot. He especially hadn't predicted the shine, or rather sheen, of his coin to give him away. The first explanation came to his mind immediately went out of his mouth. I done some work up there. Construction. Anyway, looking for some pony by the name of Grizzaloo. He tried to start walking, but Shining felt a sudden ping in his stomach that something about her demeanor had changed as she stopped polishing the glass held aloft by her magic.
You're here for a grizzle. Tell me, Colt, what kind of building do you work to?
Excavation was the first thing that came to mind. It might have also been the worst of his possible answers. Trying to not be too obvious, going solo nevertheless groaned. Neeps put down the glass, along with the rag that was attending to it, and looked at him square in the eyes.
Oi! You're one of his diggers then, I take it. So, you have a right lot it is to coming in here looking for him.
It's important, Solo stated emphatically, almost teasingly of Shining's accent.
Right. I bet it is, if you're willing to risk pissing him right off. You'll head on back now, and you'll find his office is on the right of the alleyway. Just try not to scream too loud if he breaks your knees or something. I can't very well have ye guards shutting down me shop over him.
Right. Thanks. In almost afterthought, he put a dozen more 30-bit pieces in her bowl. They boastfully enough covered the fine, seat face and shining armor, and the royal guard had to break their own way in later. The door to the back of the tavern opened, and along with an ear-rending creak, behind it lay a long and narrow hall led by two dim overhead lamps. The whole place felt claustrophobic and constraining, which did nothing for the captain's nerves. He was reminded of the Candlelight Palace gauntlet, walking forward to meet the commander face to face for the very first time. Like the late guard's pony, Shining knew of Grizzloo only by reputation. The Earth Pony Stallion was supposedly some sort of vigilante and small-time criminal who didn't really care much about the guard, so as long as he didn't get in the way of his justice. When Shining had inherited the post of the captain, his predecessor had warned him that life was a lot easier if Grizzloo was allowed to go about his business unheard. In exchange for looking the other way around for some of the other minor drug trafficking, prostitution, and occasional assault, the guard received a surprisingly large quantity of tip-offs on bigger fish in the criminal underworld from every corner of Equestria. How this seemingly small-time criminal managed to get this information and spill it without losing his neck was a mystery that Shining Armor didn't have time to investigate. Because Grizzloo was a shady figure, though, the outstanding guard's pony and Shining Armor had never actually had a chance to meet him. It had been a very long time since Shining Armor had gone into a meeting with a criminal, trusting that the pony wouldn't stab him in the back. Despite Grizzloo's rep, the captain viewed him no differently.
Smooth move, Captain,
she told him with as much sarcasm as she could drench onto the words.
I don't get what's so big deal about construction work.
Going solo groaned aloud.
You told her you were a hit pony.
A hit pony? What? I told her I did excavations! You know, for foundations! His words trailed off as he realized his own implications.
Shallow graves, Captain. And before we go any further, you're done talking with Grizzloo. He wouldn't listen to me. You're doing the talking with Grizzloo. He won't be listening to me anyway.
Judging by the silence that followed, that was all there was to say on the matter. The door to Grizzloo's office opened without a horrifying squealing, or any noise at all. It was perfectly oiled, as the only hanging on the air, and it took only the slightest magical effort to allow Shining's passage. The inside of the room was barely more than a broom cupboard, containing a cheap wooden desk crammed into the center of magic pile crates. They were stacked nearly to the height of the room's sole light source, a window high above the table on the opposite wall. Two of these crates, labeled for the practice invariating beverages they contained, had been commandeered to serve as a makeshift seating on the closer side of the desk. The other end had a real, if also cheap, wooden seat. In this seat was a pony a little smaller than Shining Armor. His brown coat and brown mane gave him an incredibly forgettable appearance. Making him even less novel, his cutie mark was secured behind his desk, a rough coat hanging over the back of his chair, but all he wore at the moment Shining entered was a yellow checkered necktie. He looked furious.
Hey, what are you doing here, eunuch?
The voice that accompanied the phrase was somewhere between the extreme gruffness and the sound of a gravel grinding spell would make. Shining was taken aback at the words used to address him. Excuse me?
You heard me, hot tugger. You just gonna stand there like a festival, or you gonna tell me what you want?
The stallion's face changed from mild displeasure to controlled rage when glowed slow and followed through the narrow doorway.
Ugh, Solo! My favorite mile-high clubber. Where are my bits?
Shiny shook off his surprise quickly. I'm here about...
Shut up! I'm working here. Celestia, do you even not know the rules? There's a simple order to this. I talk first, then you go. Once we get to you, step 1 is you give me your name. Then step 2, I decide whether or not to snap off your...
His words were interrupted by what could only be described as the sound of a wall exploding from the main room of the tavern. Grizzloo turned to Solo with sudden focus.
Were you followed?
I don't think...
Then you were wrong. Follow both of you. Follow me.
Without another word, the pony grabbed his coat and scrambled up the pile of crates behind him. It took only 4 seconds for his agile body to reach the window, which he bucked into a dozen pieces with no particular difficulty.
Do you want to get arrested?
Before they could answer, he let out the small hole into the morning air. Shining offered Solo a quick glance. She nodded, and the two began to make their exit. As a Pegasus, it was much easier for her to reach the exit, and he was left to awkwardly force his way up the stack of boxes. Nearly to the window, he heard a loud force collide with the door. Its wood cracked, peeling into the room with some immense force. With the reflexes of a soldier, he threw up an arcane barrier, striking the wood from unwanted entry. It wouldn't last more than 30 seconds, but the time was enough to get him out the window. The makeshift exit led to a narrow alleyway. Shining saw a quick glance around, taking in his surroundings. All he actually processed was Grizzloo offering an empathic notion with a hoof, as if pulling the other pony toward him. Shining Armor nodded, and then followed the Earth Pony on a short path around the corner of the building. Where's going Solo?
Living up to her name.
Grizzloo explained in a hoarse whisper.
I sent her to the old mines. We'll meet her in a minute. But first, I want to see who these punks are. If it's the new guard captain, I'll break his bucket horn off and shove it so far up his...
Shining had to stop himself from giving away his cover by protesting that he wasn't behind whatever had happened. Instead, he interrupted the beginning of a question. Should I go to her then, or...
You're big for a witch doctor. I hope you know how to fight.
Grizzloo placed an ear to the door of the tavern. A smile broke across his face, and then he pressed himself flat against the building's dull brickwork. It only took a moment for the door to fly open. The pony who leapt out was a burly Pegasus with a short-crotched mane and a foul expression. Both his forehooves were covered by bladed steel, and a heavy black coat adorned his frame. Shining might have gone on analyzing the stallion, were it not for his obvious danger. Magic was ready, but it came too slow. A sickening snap issued from the Pegasus's left wing, as Grizzloo brought his forehooves together directly on the central joint. The stallion screamed in agony, low and desperate, for the incredible pain of his broken wing. Shining's horn let loose a burst of magic, out of pity more than necessity. He knocked the suffering pony unconscious with ease. The captain had had a moment to stare at the pony's garment, and recognize it. He had seen it the night or two before, meeting the sons of Stalingrad Tsar. Given the ruthless anger their leader had shown in casual conversation, the presence in downtown said bad things to Shining Armor.
Let's go!
Grizzloo ordered. The unicorn couldn't help but catch a glimpse of annoyance in the other stallion's tone. Nevertheless, the two darted off into the alleyways of downtown, dashing from shadow to shadow as Grizzloo trained eyes searched for the ponies in dark coats. After a dozen minutes of running and sneaking, Shining could see the entrance into the old gem mines ahead. It was only a dozen feet from the crooked side street in which they were hiding. He was ready to burst forward where Grizzloo sent a hoof to his chest. "It's right there!" Shining protested.
Yeah, I can bucket see!
The criminal gestured toward the other direction of Gravel Street, back toward where the tavern's unremarkable face was still visible in the distance. There, a group of ponies in similar black cloaks were surrounding a familiar unicorn mare.
They took tiny turnips.
Tiny turnips?
The bartender. She calls herself Wee Nips because he thinks it sells drinks better. It's just as fucking stupid as anything else you witch doctors come up with. But she's a good pony. I'm not letting her get hurt.
You're not going to hurt her, Grizzaloo. They're guards ponies.
You know about the bucket black coats? You're a puddle of surprises, Boneface. You're dead wrong, though. They're not like the wimpy guard we've got out here. Stalingrad isn't a nice place. Just because she's innocent doesn't mean she's safe with them.
What are we supposed to do about it? There are... Shiny gave a quick count of the cluster of ponies. 8 of them, and just 2 of us. Hoping to avoid a confrontation, he didn't add that he was probably the equivalent of 3 average guards ponies in a fight. It didn't help that he had no frame of comparison for the Stalingrad soldiers.
We do something stupid. Can you teleport with some pony else?
Not from this distance. Grizzly laughed.
Be ready to get her when you've got an opening.
Shining had heard words like those from before from recruits about to try something that would inevitably get them hurt or killed. He raised a hoof to stop the criminal, only to find himself too late, as Grizzly walked proudly into plain view, directly toward the mass of clothes and his own inevitable arrest.
Hey!
Grizzly began, before unleashing a particularly potent slur for the Stalingrad stallions. Suffice it to say that it had curious and likely scientifically impossible implications regarding their parentage, and that it is not fit to be repeated here. Grizzly concluded his unique greeting with 3 more words.
You looking for some pony?
He shouted. They turned. In an almost comical fashion, the cluster of ponies gave each other a quick glance. Then, as one, some of them set off after him. Grizzly wasted no time in making himself scarce down another side street. The pony who remained with Neeps was a thin, almost emaciated-looking unicorn. He was unarmed, save his horn, which meant it would likely come to a class of magic were Shiny to confront him. Though he had no desire to deal with the Stalingrad stallion, Shiny needed Grizzly's information if he had any hope of saving Princess Luna and catching Masquerade. As ridiculous as the idea was, if Grizzly was willing to risk his life and freedom to save Neeps, the captain would have to earn his trust. Grizzly was obviously meant for him to simply rush her and teleport her away. The strategy would have worked well against a Pegasus or an Earth pony, but another unicorn was a different matter entirely. Instead, a direct confrontation was the best choice. He steeled himself against with a calming breath, squared his shoulders, and stepped out into the street. Being the large, intimidating pony he was, it didn't take long for the black coat to spot him. He shouted something in a tongue Shiny didn't understand and didn't bother to process. The meaning was obvious. They wanted him to stop, give himself up. Just the way the guard's pony stood was enough for Shiny to recognize the most common of all orders. Unfortunately for the other unicorn, the disguised captain wasn't about to concede. The rose glow of his mana spread slowly up his horn, building towards a spell. He watched the other unicorn intently, hoping to learn his play. What the captain of the Royal Guard faced was no simple brawl of telekinesis, nor the fancy duels of pastries or knives thrown between feuding nobles. He and his foe were both real mages, prepared to use every ounce of their magic in ways most ponies would think impossible. There were 10,000 petty rules to such engagements, but in the end, Shining Armor learned that it all came down to instincts and intuition. There was little time in battle to be spent wondering what efficiency of war to guard oneself with, or calculate the rate at which a foe was able to gather their mana. The pony who acted first and best would always win. Shiny was that pony. He had always been that pony. In his youth, Twilight compared the way he thought to their games of chess. Shiny was always the White Knight, and he always moved first. The blast of raw mana flew 3 from his horn, a red bolt of lightning. Its purpose was to freeze the other unicorn's access to his mana, effectively rendering the battle in a single blow. It collided with a sheer white shield, 2 feet from the other pony's face. Where it rebounded, it flew back on its caster. Despite the skill of his hard-earned instincts, Shiny spared a moment to think. There were, essentially, 3 skills that a unicorn wielded in battle. The first was its speed at which the unicorn could gather mana. It was Shiny's weakest talent, though he was by no means weak. The Stalingradi was indefinitely much faster, judging by the speed at which he raised his ward. Most would have had to ignite their horns a full 3 seconds earlier to rebound the level of magic to capture the throne. The ward in question was an embarrassment by Shining standards, but he dared not raise his own trademark spell for fear that he would be recognized. Carrying his spell would take more mana than he could raise before it struck. Fortunately, simply sidestepping was an easy third option, if one was surprisingly often went unused in major formal duels. Shining took it with no particular note. The black cloak narrowed his eyes when the reflected smell missed. As the faster of the two mages, he gathered mana for another spell and released an orb of white light. Shining didn't know the spell's name, but he could recognize the direct attack when he saw one. I hit my spell injury, or outright death. It was the sort of spell a guard's pony would never wield, yet one he found himself somehow unsurprised to find coming for one of Red Egg's subordinates. He looked to the side again, well in advance of the attack, only to watch his trajectory change in midair and continuing toward him. The second of three skills of a unicorn in battle went by several names. Some called it efficiency or potency. The term referred to the return that a pony got on the mana that he or she spent. Ponies who had seen Shining Armor fight had a different term for the skill. They called it strength, or simply power. With little more energy than it took most ponies to lift a teacup, Shiny hefted a streetwise wagon and swung it into the path of the oncoming spell. In a burst of energy, the wagon exploded. Splinters went through Shining Armor's coat. Little drops of blood left his shoulders and legs. None were deep enough to truly hurt him, but they did make a clear example of the fact he was fighting for his own life. He rolled to the side on the rough pavement of Grapple Street, as two beams of magic flew past his head. Though not Shining's equal, the other unicorn was also strong, fighting without any sort of handicap. Shining saw his foe's horn ignite for a bigger, stronger spell, and his instincts told him he had found a weakness in that action, one which laid in neither strength nor speed. The third talent was named Focus. Magic, especially magic at great traffic or specific effects, required great attention. The greater pony's focus, the more powerful spells he could bring to bear. Focus had another significant factor, though, which often went overlooked by the average mage. As the Stalingradi raised his killing spell, Shining's magic seized control of the cobblestone street beneath them. Growth magic and raw force together turned the ground into a sheer wall of stone, easily 10 feet in height. Shining knew the makeshift barrier wouldn't be enough to stop an attack like the one his opponent was conjuring. It was his hope that the other pony knew this as well. In fact, Shining Armor was relying on it. The Stalingradi played exactly as Shining expected, when he blasted straight through the wall of cobblestone with an incredible light and roaring cry of power. When the dust and rubble settled, leaving a battered but mostly level street, his enemy was nowhere in sight. Worried, the black cloak conjured more magic to his horn. Then he felt a hoof collide with his neck from behind, strong enough to put cloud in his eyes and throw his body aside. Shining Armor was still disoriented from the sudden brute force of his own teleportation, but he had not the time to waste. He grabbed onto the other pony with simple force and slammed him against the wall of the nearest building. His heavy black coat settled slowly over his unconscious body after he fell to the ground. In time, his wounds would heal. The guard captain took only a moment to regain his energy, before turning toward Wee Nips. Though she was mostly unharmed, wearing only a few bruises on her face and shoulders, she lay unmoving. At first, Shining suspected that she had been knocked unconscious, but a simple spell told him that the unicorn's magic held her still. It was a simple act to undo the arcane bindings. "You all right, Nips?" The mare stood up and brushed off her apron from the dirt of the road, though her body clearly told Shining that she was shaken by recent events. Her tone was still firm, proud, and nearly incomprehensible. "I've been better, but ye are a class act saving me from them. How did ye survive that blast?" "It didn't hit me. He put too much focus into the spell he cast, and not enough into watching me. Right after I put up that wall, I teleported behind him. Too much of his focus was on his spell, so he didn't notice. I got the drop on him." "Well, that's mighty clever of ye. I can't say I blame ye for putting him on the wall like that. Sure we don't have much honor for honor guard." "Honor guard?" Shining's heart skipped a beat. "They're Stalingradi ponies. They're not the honor guard."
"Well, I ain't gonna tell you otherwise. Except for what they said they were. They wanted Grease, but they also want some pony by the name of Soldier On.
Can't say I heard that one before. Not like Jedi or mirror image. Shining spoke without thinking his words. Go home. Stay away here for a while. Get out of Camelot quietly, if you can. You don't have to tell me twice, Cap. Thank you again. With that, she scuttled off into some sort of part of the low city, out of view of the hunting guards ponies and the hiding criminals all around. Left alone, Shining Armor turned back to the other end of Gravel Street, where the only thing separating him from the ancient gem mines beneath the palace was the pile of rubble and dust left behind from the battle. He crested the obstacle with a single leap and charged forth into darkness. Rainbow woke off soft, grainy dirt with an aching in her wings and a sore, hollow feeling weighing down her eyelids. It was the same feeling she felt every morning without fail, exasperated only by the cold and solid ground beneath her and the barely lit morning sky to surround her. There was only one solution. She flared her wings, and in an instant she was off. The plane didn't get very far. In fact, she didn't even get off the ground. The dull crunch of her face digging the dirt was enough to alert Dead Reckoning that she had awakening. It took an older pony a bit of chuckling to struggle out his thoughts. Was that a nightmare or... Fine, Rainbow groaned, pulling herself up. The sun was a fair way into the sky over the jungle, and the beautiful blue sky was calling her. She wasn't supposed to fly up past the canopy, but that didn't mean she couldn't at least get off the ground. It was weird that she hadn't just taken off, but even the Wonderbolts had bad days. Must have been just nerves. She readied herself more slowly this time, carefully adjusting her guiding feathers to the wind and setting up her stance for a jump into the air. She thrust her wings again, more cautiously this time, and again found herself grounded. What the hey? I can't fly! Instead of freaking out, the rational reaction to Pegasus losing her ability to fly, Reckoning smiled knowingly. I warned you about this last night, Dads. I told you about the fate seeds. You said they used up my magic. You didn't say I wouldn't be able to fly! Reckoning rolled at least one of his eyes. You need magic to fly, Dash. That's how it works. Don't talk like this is okay! You took away my flying! Rainbow gripped her skull in both forehooves and wondered how she was going to survive. You're acting like a fool, Rainbow. Reckoning released his wing's grip on the wooden spoon he had been using to make breakfast and walked over to his new partner. It's only for a few hours, and in the end, you'll be a better flyer for it. Get over yourself and grab something to eat. We're heading out soon. The filly was having none of his calming advice. How long do I have to wait? Is it a few hours, 2, or like 5? I don't want to be stuck on the ground forever. Reckoning's irritation finally boiled down to humor. He put a wing over his eyes as he let out an exasperated chuckle. Can't tell you exactly. It depends on how much magic you have for the seeds to eat up. When I eat fate seeds, I go with that for probably 8 or 9 hours. You've probably got more magic than me, though. More than 9 hours? That's not okay! 2 bowls of thick brown stew were served up in a pair of bowls, along with paired ceramic canteens. The chef paid no mind to the younger mare, who was actively running around in circles his workspace, kicking up dust and dirt with every pass. I mean, that's like a whole day! I'll go to bed, and I still won't have my magic! You probably already slept off 8 of those hours, Stas. It honestly won't be long now. So please, sit down. Eat something. It was as if he spoke some sort of magic word. Rainbow stopped mid-pace, slowly folded her wings, and walked over to the little pile of glowing charcoals that had been their campfire. I guess I can last for an hour if it means I'll be a better flyer. She lowered her nose to the bowl and offered its contents a tentative sniff. Oh, this smells good. Thank you. Reckoning let Rainbow go down a few bites before he spoke up again. Don't get your hopes up for an hour, though. I'm an old stallion now, and you're still young and fit. If your lightning was anything to judge by yesterday, you'll be closer to what the commander takes. Rainbow waited for him to give a number. Instead, he followed with a long pause, then a minor correction. Took. Socially dense as he usually was, the stunned flyer knew the sort of topic when she spotted it. Did you know him very well? Reckoning looked up from his own meal, straight into Rainbow's magenta eyes. A hollow laugh escaped his lips.
That's what I should have. Didn't even know his real name. Just the commander. Then again, even Princess Celestia and Soldier On called him that. He wasn't much for words. But I'd probably be living out my last days in some retirement home, sucking down lemonades and playing bingo if it weren't for him.
His distaste for retired life was almost palpable.
When he ate the seeds, it took him 17 hours to get his magic back. It's the most I ever heard of.
But that's, like, twice as long as you.
No pony has ever been as strong as commander. I doubt any pony ever will be. That's why he was the commander. Why it was his job to protect Celestia. Alone.
Reckoning's eyes refocused, as if suddenly remembered that Rainbow was still in front of him.
Until yesterday, he was the only pony I ever heard of who could buck lightning.
Rainbow looked up from her bowl suddenly. You mean you can't do that?
No pony could do that. I mean, there were stories about it in the guard. They say Commander Hurricane could do it. You know, for the heartwarming story?
Yeah, I remember. I got to play him in the pageant. Reckoning let out a small chuckle.
Fits you well. They say he could do it. Buck lightning without needing a cloud. It was just an old mare's turn, though, until the commander. And now, you.
Reckoning smiled.
I'm glad to have some pony as strong as you around to protect me, Rainbow.
Well then, maybe you shouldn't have taken away my magic.
Just finish your dinner, Dash. When we're done packing up camp, we can set off. It's 240 miles to Falder's clearing.
He closed his eyes, as though the act somehow let him see the map of the dense jungles.
I'd at least like to make it across the marina before we camp again, but that means we'll have to make good time over the ditch.
Suddenly his eyes popped open.
Think you could do 60 miles today, Dash? We'll catch a raft after that.
Rainbow nodded.
Let's get going.
Shining peeked around the corners, keeping his horn alight as he passed by the cave after cave of half-mined gemstones. His entire world reflected around the glow of his magic, casting his off-colored face on every wall. It wasn't hard to see why Cadence still had nightmares of this place. It was like the worst kind of carnival funhouse, only without the pretense of humor. Save the unicorn himself, nothing moved or skittered or even breathed. In the very air of the mines was dead. He stepped past the spent mine shaft, complete with rusted tracks, and felt a sudden shift in the air. He wasn't alone. Careful not to change his pace, he continued as though his follower had gone unnoticed. The other pony drew closer, slowly and quietly, until he could nearly reach Shining's back. Only when he heard the sound hooves leaving the ground did Shining Armor turn, snatching the other pony out of the air. The stallion's body crunched as the incredible force of Shining's telekinesis trapped him against the ground.
Buck! Celestia, you could have just said something! Let me go!
Grizzaloo? Shining released his magic, taking a step back. You're back already?
No pony can keep up with me in downtown.
He tilted his head back and spoke calmly over Shining's shoulder.
Hey, my honey cub. It's your friend. We're finally bucket set.
Ducking out of the shadows, going solo swept down from overhead. Who the hell were they?
Black cloaks,
Grizzaloo explained, gravelly voice soaked in sarcasm.
Stangradis, secret police. Real nice ponies, even by our standards. Plot lickers and full nappers, every last one. Thanks, by the way, for leading them right to my bucking office.
I already told you, Grizzaloo, we wouldn't follow it. Solo rolled her eyes. Unless you have something else to say about camp. Shiny shook his head. No. Like Grizzaloo said, there's from Stalingrad. Anyway, that doesn't matter now. I need my answers.
You know, really?
Grizzaloo stated incredulously.
You know what? Hold on.
The pony turned his head away. Shiny leaned forward to see what the other stallion was doing with his jacket. The motion of his neck placed him well within Grizzaloo's reach, a fact which the criminal exploited by slapping Shining Armor across the face with surprising strength. The guard's pony was thrown to the floor of the cave.
Get your head in the game, you stubborn ass! We're trapped in the gem mines, and it's not like the Black Cloaks don't know we're in here, unless you have some secret way to get out.
Grizzly's words trailed off into the echoes in silence as he inspected the hoof which he used to strike shining armor. As he rose, the guard's pony could see that some of the powder and dye in his coat rubbed off, painting the normally brown hoof a slick shade of off-green. The less tasteful of the two ponies stood, almost stunned, as his eyes shifted from the color on his hoof to the painfully white spot on Shining's cheek. Grizzly, it's not. Going Solo's words didn't last long.
Shut up. You.
He pointed a hoof at Shining's chest.
If you don't want to spend the rest of your life as an Earth Pony, tell me who you are!
Seeing no point in keeping up the charade, the guard's pony ignited his horn. A simple spell removed the rest of the color from his mane and coat. The pile of disgusting chemicals was deposited on the floor beside a particularly large gemstone, leaving behind a face not so long ago decorated the front page of every newspaper in Canterlot. My name is Shining Armors, Grizzly. I'm the... Grizzly didn't waste the opportunity to cut the bigger pony off by giving him a slick kick to the ribs. Judging by the fact that nothing cracked, Shining knew he had been given mercy, though his side still ached from the blow.
Every pony know who you are, Captain! You have to be living under a rock in Sablanca not to!
Grizzly grounded a hoof in the dirt.
Well, now that we know, let's finish this like stallions!
What are you talking about? Shining asked, utterly lost. Solo groaned, pincing the bridge of her face.
Grizzly, he didn't lead the black cloaks to you. I told him to come in disguise. He doesn't want to arrest you.
Shining Armor picked off with the mare off. You were the last pony that Mark Down talked to before he died. I just need to know what you told him. Grizzly sat down on his flank, quiet for a moment. A shiver slouched down Shining Armor's spine when a thin and vile grin broke across his face.
All right, Captain. Let's talk business. I don't want to die, and the Black Cloaks would kill me if I tried to get out of this place on my own. So here's the deal. You get me out of these mines alive, and I'll tell you what you want.
Shining nodded slowly and determinedly, though he had fully intended to guide both ponies out of the mines, regardless of their information. Deal, Grizzly. Follow me. He laid his horn softly and turned deeper into the mines.
Shannon, that's the wrong way out.
Going Solo noted. There's a secret passage into the palace deeper in. The Chainsleys used it a few years back. Grizzly shook his head.
I can't just go walking around the palace.
Shining Armor smiled and laughed. Not looking like you do right now, no. With no further explanation, he led them around familiar passages, deeper and deeper toward the innermost shafts. Keynes had been unwilling to head back into the mines, so Twilight had shown him the way. His sister's arcane marks still persisted on the walls, clear as day to any pony who knew the spells to find them. He offered no commentary to explain the symbols as they passed, leaving Grizzly and Solo to stare at them in awe. Finally, however, the three came to a sheer cliff face. After taking a moment to gather his mana, Shining teleported the entire group up to the top. Knowing Twilight, these sizzles probably say something very technical and very precise, and teasing to her big brother. The captain then proceeded forward to the heavily barred door that offered the only passage into and out of the caves. He stopped only when he heard the sound of retching. A backwards glance reminded him that his passengers had less experience with teleportation than the experienced maze. Grizzly got over his nausea quickly, but Solo took far more time, stepping behind a cluster of crystals to empty her stomach quite audibly.
Mess!
Grizzly muttered, offering no explanation for the words. Shining's only surprise at that statement was that it didn't include any cursing or racial slurs. Regardless, when the Pegasus reappeared, she seemed decidedly less green, and far close to her usual soft blonde coloration. Without a word, she nodded, and Shining Armor turned back to the door. Though it had no keyhole or handle, its lock gave away gently, willingly to the push of his magic, allowing the three into the dark underbelly of the castle. The very first short hallway ended in a T-shaped fork, and when the group reached it, Grizzly took a look over its edge and carefully peeked around. Relax, Shining told him. This is the Honor Guard headquarters, and they're all out searching for the assassin who tried to kill Princess Luna. He neglected to mention the risk of running into more Black Cloaks, as he still didn't figure out what Neat's comment on the honor guard could have meant.
What?
Grizzly peeked a brow.
You mean Masquerade's target was the princess? You're fucking kidding me!
Shining turned to him. How did you know about Masquerade?
You said Mark Dan was your buddy, right? Kept asking about her, so I assumed she'd off some pony important. Didn't realize he was that high on the food chain, though.
He shook his head in a mixture of mild amusement and ever-present displeasure.
Damn.
Just follow me. The hallways gave away shortly to an armory. It was long before Shining Armor found himself leaning against the racks of armor in the room, watching as Grizzly and Golden Slow struggled to powder themselves. This is stupid, Shining. To recognize this in an instant, the latter protested, as he struggled to get the tragically disgusting subject spread onto her wings. First off, there shouldn't be any black cloaks in the palace, just normal guards who answer to me. They won't look twice at you, and even if they do, they'll listen to me. However, before we go, he turned conspicuously to Grizzly. I need to know what you told Mark Down.
Well, the way I see it, we're pretty damn far from the clear right now, Shiner, so I guess you could say my memory's still a little fuzzy.
Shiny stepped away from the rack, squaring himself. Our deal was that would get you out of the mines, which I already have. What I'm doing now is free, so I hope you're grateful. But regardless, you're going to tell me what I want to know now.
There's a paga up at Cloudsdale who works at the shipping warehouse. Runs some scratch at the side, but he's mostly clean. When we get out, I'll tell you his name.
Shine merely closed his eyes, suppressing his aggravation. Fine. His horror ignited, bluntly applying the last spots of powder behind Golden Slow's wings. He let the 2 ponies squeeze into their nearly fitting, gilded armor, and then gestured out the door. Now follow me, and try not to say anything crude or racist to the princess.
The
Grizzly was cut off when Shining Armor put a hoof over his mouth. If you want me to get the black cloaks out of Little Canterlot, I need to speak to her quickly. Also, I have to requisition one of my sister's hot air balloons and a spell book for walking on clouds. Now follow me, and we'll take care of everything quickly. Grizzly let out a snort and shook his head.
I wasn't expecting you to be a politician.
Shut up, Grizzly. The trio made their way up from the armory into the basement, following Shining's perfect memory of the staircases, hallways, enormous green rooms, until they came to Celestia's opulent audience chamber. An enormous red carpet covered a slow slope leading up to a center of a array of gold and silver bases toward a pair of thrones. One consisted of red cloth on a golden frame. The other, a smaller seat, was silver with blue silk for its cushions. Before each sat, the water in the basins was intended to reflect the faces of the paired rulers. At the moment, only the slowly recovering form of Princess Celestia could be seen in the reflection. The guard captain couldn't help but notice that both the spaces at the foot of the throne, where the serving honor guard were normally stationed, stood empty. Captain Armor, the princess's voice bore a tone of surprise and confusion. I was told you had left Canterlot after Masquerade. I'm afraid I have a rather important meeting in a few hours, but in the meantime, I hope I can help you. Of course, Princess. Shining Armor bowed deeply, then glanced back towards his companions. Neither had followed the motion. Recruits! He hissed through gritted teeth, deliberately loud enough to catch Celestia's ears.
Don't get your horn in a knot.
Grizzly grumbled, though it did the criminal fall to a knee. Solo added nothing as he followed suit. Right, please. Celestia told him. Now, how goes your search? Well, Princess, a contact of mine had given me a target that might lead to Masquerade. In order to pursue, I'll need a hot air balloon and a copy of the spell Twilight found for walking on clouds. Celestia's brow rose. Cloudsdale? Well, I'm certain your sister won't mind if you take the one she left here. Record time. The princess's steps and formal manservant stepped out from behind the throne and nodded. That's the 3rd volume of Platinum's tome, and please see what the captain's transport has prepared. Without a word, the unicorn walked briskly past Shining Armor and out the room. Princess, there is one other thing. Well, 2, I guess. But firstly, are you certain it's safe to be here alone? After everything, Shining stopped when he felt a gentle breeze pass over his back. Only a moment later, another pony had dropped in from somewhere overhead in the room, se- 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 separating the captain from going solo.
The princess is not being alone. I am here to guard her.
Shining recognized the distinct accent without even turning. Nevertheless, he stepped back, putting a much-needed personal space between himself and the unwelcome commandant. Red Ink, what are you doing here?
Commander, Red Ink, now. Captain, Armor.
Shining's armor twisted as a terrible fear became true. Celestia spoke up from the far end of the room. As we agreed, I replaced Soldier On. Red Ink was trained by Steel, and he knows a great deal about Masquerade. Shining Armor's mind raced. Then it's true. Your black cloaks attacked Low Canterlot. Celestia sat forward at the words, but Red Ink spoke first.
My guard is none of your concern, Armor.
It is what you cause a civil disturbance and attack innocent Tower Keeper!
Attack!
Red Ink grunted smoothly, adjusting his black cloak to reveal the gleaming golden breastplate beneath. Shining saw the stripes and banners of awards on his chest, and the back of his mind was furious that the stallion had the gall to honor himself so boldly. Apparently sensing the anger in the captain's stance, Red Ink's words were stated strongly and angrily, coming across like veiled threats.
I would be having strong words with my stallions if this was true, though it is not. I think perhaps that you and I should speak outside.
Not waiting for an answer, the burly Pegasus pushed open the doors.
I am taking only a moment, Princess. The captain and I must share knowledge of the assassin. Be watchful.
Of course. The princess bowed her head in acknowledgement. Shining, Grizzloo, and Solo walked out the otherwise barren palace of the waiting room. Pillars and a marble checkered floor defined what was otherwise a boring and empty space. Once inside, Red Ink rolled his neck, emitting 3 delightful pops.
I have warned you that good pony is a bad soldier. Armor.
Listen up, Plaga!
Shut up, recruit.
Oh, sorry. Shut up, recruit! Shining snapped at Grizzloo.
Buck you, Shining Armor! This ass went out to nips!
Grizzloo ran forward, obviously readying himself for a mighty buck. For what Shining Armor had seen, Grizzloo was strong, fast, and thought dirty. He was a good fighter. Compared to Red Ink, those traits mean nothing. The Pegasus placed the wing on the ground, using it as a pivot to spin his entire body. His full weight was transferred to a single kick from his rear leg, was connected with Grizzloo's jaw as he approached. The blow was accompanied by a crack of very literal thunder, which shook the room and put cracks in the ornate glass of windows. The disguised criminal was picked off the ground and thrown the entire length of the room by a single blow. His body smacked against the far wall, and then slid down the stone surface with a slowly squeaking crumble.
I am cruel to you. I am kind to you, crude stallion. In Stalingrad, you would be dead for your words, let alone for your action.
With a smile, the new honor guard turned to face Shining.
Your force is lacking even discipline. The princess and I will be replacing you soon too. You are disgrace.
I don't attack civilians in the streets. Don't try and deny it.
Why would I? No, you are too afraid to do what has to be done. That is why you are not real guard. Just police pony in big armor. Bartenders, perhaps, who wounds heal easily. In exchange, I hunt down Soldier On and Masquerade and others. It is good trade.
We're supposed to protect ponies!
We protect Equestria, Captain, not ponies in it. There is difference. Your commander taught me that.
The commander was a great guards pony. Shining barely knew the stallion, save by rep. The words were simply meant to challenge Ink's barbaric methods.
Yes, Captain, great guards pony, like me, knew how to make necessary sacrifice.
Ink shook his head.
I should be liking to know 2 things from you. First, what is in Cloudsdale?
Shining's response was cold and factual. Just a name.
Masquerade is my investigation now. Do not try keeping secrets, Captain. I will save Luna since you cannot. I chose lesser of two evils. You deny both choices. Costs are high.
The royal guard had to force his hooves to not shake from anger. The stallion before him was the very antithesis of everything he had come to believe as a guard's pony, and everything he thought to make the royal guard resemble. I'll show you, Red Ink. A guard's pony could protect Equestria without using fear and intimidation. There's always a better path.
I disagree. Perhaps we can call it a challenge then, Shining Armor. Whoever claims Masquerade or Soldier on first wins.
Shining's first instinct was to deny the ridiculous assumption. Lives were on the line. There was no time for some ridiculous competition. Even as reprimand was processed, however, Shining had another thought. Staring him in the face was his one clear chance to do something about the pony who had no place of leading the honor guard. Loser resigns their command. The grin that spread over Red Ink's face was almost sickening.
Deal!
Shining Armor slid a hoof heavily across the ground, as if readying himself to charge. The motion was made with such strength that it marred the otherwise pristine checkered marble of the floor. When his hoof came up, it slammed against Red O's, locking them in a leg shake. In the grapple, they pressed against one another. Shining was surprised to learn that the slightly smaller Pegasus was in fact stronger than his legs. They pressed for a moment, then released one another.
I am looking forward to the already new Royal Guard,
Ink offered, placing back toward the doors to the audience chamber.
Before I am forgetting, one last question. My guard have not yet returned from the mission. How are you already know of my raid?
Shining Armor turned around, walking away from the other pony. I keep tabs. It's my job to protect Equestria against ponies like your guard. Oh, this chapter is good.